Good afternoon, everybody. This is Darreck Kirby back again with another edition of Mavs Fast Break. Yes, it has been a minute. No, this is not how I planned on making my return. I had actually spent a lot of time crafting this very intricate video in which I was basically unrolling a new format, a new presentation, if you will. And unfortunately, what ended up happening with that is the file corrupted in the middle of editing, so I kind of lost my entire 2 days of work. So this conversation is a live stream now because I can't really do anything else with it. It's kind of just, this is how we're going to have this conversation. So, and ignore my test comments there. I brought back the live chat. So if you guys pop in the live chat now, your comments will show up there on the sidebar. So have at it. But yes, we are going to have a conversation now because the Mavericks are still as up and down as they ever have been. I understand that. But the problem to me is what the state of the second superstar is in Dallas. Because we are once again going through a stretch here where KP is just not readily available. He's dealing with injuries now. It's an ankle. And it's hard to bank on it, right? Like, you've had 64 games this year. He's played 40. That's a lot of games to have missed. Part of that was the late start to the year. A lot of it has been more nagging injuries, nothing critical, nothing like the ACL or even the meniscus tear. That's good, but it's still something where your best ability is availability. And if you're trying to really cobble together a roster to make a run, you have to be able to count on that. And unfortunately for KP, he has not been able to count on his health throughout his now, this is towards the end of his second full season in Dallas. And there's a lot to discuss here. You could look at it and say, I see we got 22 people in here, but no comments are coming through. So let me know. How would you let me know? I was about to say, let me know in the comments if you're not able to post comments. How would you let me know? Well, we'll figure that out. But KP's health has been a major thing holding him back, unfortunately, as he has not been able to stay on the court. And the Mavericks and the pairing that they had hoped to put together for 5, 10, 12, hell, Mark Cuban said at the introductory press conference, 20 years together with Luka and KP, two superstars under 25 years old. The hope was that you could put them together and that they could wreak havoc on the league, especially with their games on paper complementing each other rather well. But it hasn't worked, and you can say, hey, it's more about the offensive system that Carlisle and the Mavericks are running. Obviously, Stephen Silas had a huge hand in the offense last year, a historically good offense, and now he's the head coach in Houston, so that's worth some discussion there about how much of a role that plays in it. You can talk about the touches. We've seen at times with KP not getting a lot of touches in the fourth quarter, games where he's had like one or fewer touches in the fourth quarter. That's obscene. That should not happen. I mean, I understand Luka has elevated to a new height. And coming in, the expectation was this is going to be 1 and 1A. And that's probably what KP was okay with. But it has not developed that way. Instead, it has very clearly been, here's Luka, and then in a distant second option, here's KP. And I think that has bothered him a little bit. And at times, you see the body language isn't quite there. Now, I don't like being Mr. Body Language expert or professor studying all this stuff because I think it's a little ridiculous, and I think people are projecting what they think they see on there. Even when Luka and KP were considered to be more tight, right? We heard during the bubble last year how they were tight. Their reactions were more subdued. Like when Luka would hit this tremendous, I remember against the Bucks game. What up, Eric? So the comments do work. He threw a bounce pass like through someone's legs against the Bucks in the bubble last year, and it was a tomahawk dunk for, I think, Maxey. KP had already fouled out of the game at that point, and KP from the bench was just like, ooh, he's like pointing to Luka like, I see you, kid. It wasn't like jumping up and down, losing his mind, anything like that. So I view it in that sort of perception where it's like he's always been a little more reserved. So I don't like to get in here and try and talk about like, oh, body language this, body language that. Like, you're projecting. You're saying what you think you see or want to see, maybe you're afraid you see, maybe not that you actually want to see it, but still. I don't like getting into all that, but you can say there are times where it looks like they don't know how to use them. There's other times when it looks like they're not getting them the ball at all, and it's like, you got to have a more consistent thing. To KP's point, if you're not able to be available regularly, and if you're not able to be able to play at your high end, by which I mean when KP is right physically and mentally, he's an all-world talent. He's an all-NBA player. So often he is not that, though. In the games where he shines, he is a wrecking machine. No one else can deal with it, right? We saw this through the bubble last year. After the Dwight Powell Achilles last year in January, KP moved from the 4 to the 5, and he blossomed in that role. Even though before the offense and the rust knocked off for him last year, the rebounding and the defense, particularly rim protection, were still very high end. So we didn't like that the scoring and the shooting wasn't there, but we at least appreciated that those other aspects that were needed were being addressed. Now, he has continued to rebound at a good clip, but for much of this year, he was one of the worst defenders in the league, and part of that is, again, the situations in which the Mavericks were allowing him to be put more out on the perimeter, more guarding in the pick and roll, less around the rim than he is comfortable. So you had these situations where you weren't putting him in positions of strength, and then you're watching what was the one part of his game holding up fall off. Now, when you moved him to the 5 in January, you saw how he could start to come through and started looking more like that all-world talent. And that was great. That was really, really great to have that option, to have that where in the bubble, before you even started the playoffs, you had him and Luka both averaging 30 and 10. That's a wrecking crew of a team, and that's what Dallas thought they were going to get. 25-year-old KP, 21 at the time year old Luka Doncic, wrecking shop in the playoffs, and you can build around that. If I contend to this day, if not for the KP meniscus tear against the Clippers, Dallas beats LA. They move to the second round and they face the Nuggets, who in that series against the Clippers went down 3-1 as well before turning it around. I don't know how that would have shook up, worked out. We're rolling here. I'm a little rusty. You'll have to excuse that, I guess. But I think Dallas saw finally what they expected to have, and they felt like geniuses for it. They were like, see, this is it. This is what we've been trying to tell everybody. Just wait, just be patient. And look, here it is. It's finally happening. Then the meniscus happened. He missed all the offseason. Granted, it was a stupid short offseason, 7 weeks. That's from the time the finals ended to the preseason of the following year. Ridiculous. You had that set up, and you have a situation then where he starts the year late. Okay. And when he comes in, that first game looks good. Offensively, doesn't look like there's much rust. Excellent. Then it got rough. And it's been kind of back and forth, up and down since then. But I feel like we're in a pretty extended rut right now. And you're having these things where, hey, before the trade deadline, he was having the issues with his back. Where, even though we've had like a week off because of the All-Star break, he's now going to miss like 3 games, I think it was, with lower back soreness. That was a weird development, and that's why the rumor mill went crazy talking about Dallas looking to trade KP, and it didn't make sense because he had no value at that point. You would be giving him away for pennies on the dollar. You wouldn't be getting anything in return for him. And even though you're paying him a huge contract, you're not in a position where, if you were just a team looking to acquire players and you weren't thinking about like trying to make the playoffs or make any kind of run, you would basically be okay with that. You'd be like, maybe we cut our ties and we just try to figure this out moving forward. That's not what Dallas is doing. Dallas said, no, we're fine with paying the salary as long as we can keep trying to figure this out, or he at least recoups value for us to move him down the road. Now, I'm not saying Cuban came out later and said that that was all BS and that someone was just kicking that out there. Another team was kicking that out there to try and create a storyline or a market. I don't know. I don't know that they didn't take any calls at all regarding KP. What I do think is that they are still they're determined to get something from that deal, be it him actually living up to the contract or at the very least increasing his value where they're not having to just completely tap out on that deal and just give up. So with that being the case, they held on to him. We've still seen some up and down play. We've had ankle, knee soreness, things like that. It's one thing when you're not playing the back-to-backs. It's another when you're routinely getting dinged up and sat out. And, it worked out where they finally played him the second night of a back-to-a-back. And what happens? He tweaks the ankle. So I'm afraid that's going to work into their thinking about how they want to proceed regarding the rest of the year. They are the 5 seed now, which that's great. That's great that they've been able to climb up into that 5 seed spot despite yet another painful loss to the freaking Sacramento Kings. It's good that they're in that position because I don't think this team wants anything to do with the play-in game right now. I can't remember off the top of my head who said this, but shout out to it. If I find your name or someone in the chat remembers it and calls it out, I will give that person credit because it's a simple but true statement. This Mavericks team can beat anybody in the NBA. They can also get beat by anybody in the NBA. So that's how you go from winning some gritty games, beating the Lakers back to back. That's how you beat, even people like with the Wizards. Yeah, they're the Wizards and they were garbage for a lot of this year, but they came into that game having won 12 out of 14 games. They were cooking. So you pulled out these gritty, gutty wins that you had to have, and that's awesome. But it doesn't amount as much if you're going to then turn around and drop the games to these crap teams because you remain an enigma in the fact that you can beat all these teams over 500. You have a quality record against teams over 500. But for some reason, when you should be playing against the bottom of the barrel teams, of which there are more, you're not able to win. You have a losing record in those situations. I don't understand that. I do not understand that. This team plays up or down to its competition to such a maddening degree. And there's got to be something to that, whether it's, again, coaching or just execution. I don't know. But what Dallas has to figure out now, since they are determined to stick with this combination of Luka and KP, at least for now, they're going to have to figure out how to carefully manage and then at the right moments maximize KP's value. Because right now, yes, as I have the stats on the screen here, he's averaging 20.2 points, down a tick from last year's 20.4, 9.1 rebounds. That's basically the same as last year. Last year, he averaged, let me find it here, 9.5 boards, so that's down a tick. His effective field goal percentage is actually up a little bit from last year, 47.3 as opposed to 42.7, basically a push. Then his three-point shooting, again, very similar, 36.2 now compared to 35.2. Free throw percentage, I think that's up about 6%. So that one's a little bit better of an improvement there. And his effective field goal percentage as well is up 4 points. So he's had some good improvements this year. But the problem is people expected him to, I think, go further this year. The expectation was, all right, last year you'd been out over a year. You came back, you had a knockoff rust, but you settled in January and you finished the year prior to the meniscus really strong. So what can you do moving forward? We know that there's going to be another little ramp up because of not being ready to start the year because of that meniscus surgery, which he waited really late in the offseason for. It was already a super condensed offseason, and he waited until like a month before the season, like multiple weeks passed before he finally got the surgery. I don't know what that's about. I can only assume he was hoping that he wouldn't have to actually have the surgery, that he could just work around it with with rest, but no such luck there. So he comes in late to start the year, and you think, all right, there's going to be a little bit of a ramp up. We'll say a month, maybe even 2. Well, now we're 64 games into the year, and he has played a lot of games. He's played 40 out of 64. So while he's played a lot of games, I mean, when I say he's played a lot of games, I mean like he's played enough that you would hope the rust is either knocked off or falling off at this point. And it's just been so up and down, I just don't know. Now, you could have a bad take here. You could have a Mike Bassick take from 105.3 The Fan, who, in trying to craft a narrative around KP, which he's been trying to do a lot this year, he throws out a tweet earlier that's, blowing up a little bit on Mavs Twitter, saying, in 64 games this year, Porzingis is averaging 12.6 points per game, 5.65 rebounds per game. Where do you get those numbers? What are you seeing? KP hasn't even played 60 games. He's played 40. To which he replies, exactly. In 64 games played for the team, he has 807 points, 364 rebounds. That simple math gives you those numbers. That's not how sports work. No league in the world works that way, where you count against a guy based on the numbers he's not putting up because he's not in the game. And I think Jake Kemp from The Ticket had a good response to that. And I don't have his in front of me, actually, but he was saying that, hold on, where is it? Oh, no, here it is. He replies, well, then apparently LeBron James is only averaging 16.8 points per game and 5.1 rebounds. Is it time to waive LeBron? Like, basically mocking that take. Like, that's a really dumb take to say, like, I get it. Availability. You want to have an argument on that? Talk about the 40 out of 64 games. Talk about how many games he missed last year. I don't have that figure in front of me either, but he missed, I want to say, like 18 games last year. So 18 plus these 24, yeah, you're having a major discussion at this point where Dallas can't ever seem to find a rhythm because they can't depend on him. And the one stretch they did have him dependably was around January of last year to the basically injury in the bubble. Now, I know there was a 2-month gap in there because of COVID, but on the court, in that stretch, they had him and they were able to finally get some momentum. That's been the only stretch like that really in Dallas for him. So if you're talking about a guy that's playing like half the year and he's your number 2 option, not your 1A as he had probably hoped, is that going to work out? Are you going to be able to do that and work around it? Because again, if he's not physically and mentally right, he's just an okay guy. Like he's an okay number 2 option as you look at the stats. Again, 20 points, 9 rebounds. Those are nice numbers. And his field goal, his shooting splits are all pretty much in line with his career averages. But the idea was that you should have been able to elevate him more so because he's playing alongside Luka. And while other guys on the team have undoubtedly elevated, great example of that, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dorian Finney-Smith, it creates a problem where the guy that you arguably most need to step forward, both on his own and in terms of just playing alongside Luka, you need him to be able to raise his game and Luka to help raise his game, is KP, and it's not there. And so what do? If you were actually even contemplating on any level a blockbuster move at the deadline that would have seen him moved, again, you would have been getting pennies on the dollar. I think you're in a similar position for the people who say, hey, why not move him this offseason? Or has the experiment failed? Does Dallas need to move him this offseason? I don't think that that's even a plausible conversation for the most part because, again, he's in year 2. Well, yeah, he's in year 2 of a $158 million 5-year deal. He's getting paid huge money. Someone's not going to take the contract off his hands, off your hands, because of how many games he's missing. And because it's all these nagging injuries that are keeping him off the floor, yeah, it's better than if it's another catastrophic injury, but it's really hurting the perception of his value, I think. So you have to figure out, how do you build around this team? Because a year from now, Luka is set for his max contract. Now, there's a couple things to consider here. Luka is unquestionably your franchise guy. You thought maybe you could have 2 of them and it'd be a 1 and 1A. It's not. But Luka is your franchise guy. It's unprecedented, other than Porzingis, for a guy to be drafted that high, have that kind of superstar talent potential, and to leave his rookie team without signing a new contract. Even if he got the max and then a year later asked for a trade, that's different. Basically, KP is the only major example of a guy not even getting a new deal with that team and getting moved before then. And that includes like people want to say like, oh, what about James Harden? Well, James Harden was traded at the end of his rookie contract. It wasn't the same in that regard. It was a sign and trade, and he turned down multiple offers. So that sort of, but even then. So if you're, and I think it's like a 2% chance that you would have Luka leave in any circumstance this early, but you have to instill confidence in your direction and what you're building with. And so if it's not working with KP, even, I don't care if they're besties off the court. I don't. What I care about is that it translates on the court and that you're able to consistently build around these guys. And you're tying up a lot of money in a guy in KP that's just not been available for you. So unless, and Dallas, professes to have one of the most renowned training staffs in professional sports, certainly American professional sports. And so it's like, if you have like the ultimate training staff and they're not able to keep him bandaged up and ready to go, then you might have a bigger problem here. So we're going to have to see, because if you don't have a repeat or a re-showing in the playoffs of bubble KP, Dallas, they might still be able to make some noise, but their ceiling as far as how far they can go is nowhere near, in my opinion, as high as it would be in that scenario. So if that's your circumstances that you're dealing with, then you have basically this summer, and you've got a max salary slot. You've got this summer to go make a big move. And I'm not saying just go get the biggest name. You got to find the right fit. You've made all these little moves thinking you found like, here's a 2A or a number 3 guy like Josh Richardson. That's a miss for me, I thought. And he was one of those guys that got really hammered by COVID. Him and Maxey, I believe, are the two who were most impacted by it. So you think like, oh, okay, well maybe then in that scenario you do have a little bit more leeway, but it hasn't worked for him in Dallas to that extent. So you don't have a true number 3. You're still reaching for Tim Hardaway Jr. when he's there, and he'll still have nights like he did against Detroit where he lights it up and sets a new career high. That's great. But will you be able to count on him consistently? Not so much, but the problem is you can't really consistently count on KP either. And that's a major issue. So really, you got to go find a new number 2. And it either has to be that he is the tried and true number 2 option, or he is the 2A to KP, so that at the very least you have those bases covered. Because that Luka deal's coming, you got to instill confidence, and you have to manage a soon-to-be very difficult cap situation once you have 2 max guys at that value, and you need to have really we've been talking about a 3rd star. I'll settle for a damn good player, even if it's not a star. I just need someone that can come in and be reliable. I want them to go after, and it's not a superstar name, but I want them to go after like John Collins. I'd love to see someone like that. Now, the problem there is he's restricted, and I think Atlanta's playing hardball in its negotiating tactics by saying, we're not sure you're worth a max contract. You're a nice player. We like you a lot, but I don't know about that kind of money. That puts us in a real tough spot. And so you might put an offer sheet on him. He might accept it. And then you got to wait that, 3-day period now? It used to be a week before DeAndre Jordan, the Mavericks. And so, yeah, it's like, all right, so now we're waiting 3 days. That still ties up your money while the vast majority of these big-name free agents or other targets are going to fall off the board. Not good. Not good. I don't want to see that. So there's other guys, too, that are great fits, but I think Dallas needs to be aggressive here, and I think this is the most crucial offseason, regardless of what happens in the playoffs this year, whether Dallas remains around the 5 seed and avoids the play-in game and gets a favorable matchup in this regard with like the Nuggets or something, or if they fall back and they have to do the play-in game and we have to deal with whoever we have to deal with, be that the Warriors and Steph Curry in a freaking play-in game, which I don't want to deal with, or the Grizzlies or whatever. I don't want to deal with those scenarios. Whatever happens, though, this is the most important offseason, I would argue, for the Mavericks in... Is it dramatic to say maybe ever? because we got Luka. His rookie year happened, right? And we're like, okay, here you go, rookie of the year. People see what this guy can do. Free agents are going to want to come here. Well, we don't really have the ideal cap situation. So we're going to just sign our guys. We like our guys. That's another problem that you see with the Cowboys over in Arlington. But this perception of like, we like our guys too much. We don't want to make any moves or anything like that. It kind of drives me nuts because I like our guys too. Like I said, Maxey and Dodo are two of my favorite Mavericks. They are phenomenal value contracts, and I love what they bring to the table. However, I'm also aware that at some point, you have to be willing to make aggressive moves, whether that be saying, I'm going to make sure I go get this guy, and I'm not going to tie up a bunch of money in these three guys that I like and are homegrown. That's great, but I'm going to go out and try and get this guy and make sure that I'm like fully in on building the future of the roster instead of just saying, hey, let's just kind of stay around the pretty good level that we're at right now and just hope things can break right. I hate that mentality. Conversely, I think this team has become a gun-shy franchise ever since the Rajon Rondo deal, in which they had a very good offensive team, a respectable defensive team, and they looked at the one glaring hole in their roster and they said, we don't really have a true point guard. We're kind of rocking Jameer Nelson out here with an assortment of Monte Ellis, who was still balling out at the time in Dallas, Chandler Parsons, who, that flamed out, but at the time we were still reasonably high on him, Dirk still balling out, and Tyson Chandler back at center. Like, we looked at this and we thought, this is a really good team. This could do something, but that point guard spot, Jameer Nelson is past his prime, and I don't know. We better swing for the fences. We can go get Rajon Rondo. How about that? Yeah, that's a big name. That's a championship point guard. Playoff Rondo, right. Defense, yeah, playmaking, sweet. What about his ball spacing, though? Both him and Monte kind of need the ball in their hands to be effective. He's a diva and a hothead. And Carlisle historically is the same with point guards. He's very hard on point guards. In fact, even Hall of Famer Jason Kidd, before winning a championship with Dallas, butted heads with Carlisle relentlessly to the point where there were questions about whether or not that relationship could have been salvaged. Who cares? Make the trade. We'll figure it out as we go. It blew up. And I think ever since then, they thought, we had something pretty good before, and then we meddled with it a little too much and it fell apart. And it set us back several years. Because Cuban had said, he thought he had a core for the next few years in Rondo, Monte, like literally the guys I mentioned. I mean, you could say whether or not Tyson Chandler was in those plans, but at least 3 or 4 of those guys in the starting lineup, he thought he had his core moving forward. And then instead you moved like 8 weeks down the road and it was crater. Rondo gone, basically banished forever, didn't even finish out the playoff series against Houston in the first round. Tyson Chandler, they moved on from again in the summer. Poor Tyson. He deserves so much better from Dallas both times. All of it just imploded. And what you're left with is a situation where it fell apart, and it's like it's made this franchise just gun shy about the big ballsy trade. Now, if not for the Luka deal, if not for them swinging that on draft night 2018 to flip with Atlanta, I don't know what the state of this team is. I think we're still in a situation, a purgatory of sorts, where we're trying to talk ourselves into a core that looks something like Dennis Smith Jr., Harrison Barnes, and it's so hard to project when you're like 3 years down the road of what the roster composition would look like. But the point is to say, I think we would have been just banking everything around Dennis Smith Jr. And while I want the best for Dennis Smith Jr., I want him to succeed and have a nice career. He's in his 3rd franchise at this point, and you still just see the occasional flash. So, I don't know, man. I think Dallas can't mess around. I think they have to do something very aggressive here as it relates to the roster management going forward. I think KP is probably here, whether or not, to tie it back to the title of this video and the theme, whether or not the experiment has failed, it's certainly failed to live up to expectations. And that's not to say that it can't still have a run in which it can better live up to it. But when you brought him in and you're selling us on 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 years of him and Luka running together like Dirk and Nash should have been allowed to do, you're underselling, you're underperforming. And so I think we have to have a conversation at that point about whether or not it is a great long-term fit. And the fact that KP is only in year 2 tells me he's going to be here for probably at least another year unless he restores enough value that you can get someone to bite that bullet. And he'll probably be a contract that gets moved before it's up. I just think for what the franchise's salary cap situation will look like after the summer, again, they need to hit. And then they need to re-sign Luka to a max deal. Once those two things have been accomplished, then you have to figure out what your projection looks like moving forward, and tying up that much money in KP. For if you're going to still be in a situation where you're getting out of him what you're getting out of him now, again, you can say, hey, is that Luka's fault? Is that Rick Carlisle's fault? Is that just KP and his diminishing health's fault? Whatever you say, at the end of the day, you're left only with what is on the court, the reality of the situation. So what do you think the chances are that you can have max contract Luka, if not max contract, and another big contract for another, comparable, very good player, and still have KP's max contract and build out the rest of your roster, that you can still field a contending team without the limitations imposed by a big, not effective or efficient contract in KP's. I want it to work. I want it to work with KP here. I really, really do. But after 2 years, I have to kind of acknowledge the reality that, this guy still has never played a full season in the NBA. He's always had nagging injuries. And we said, hey, we got the best training staff in the world. And, we've worked with guys who were injury prone before they got here, and yet they were great here. They had some of their best years here. Tyson Chandler is another example of that. He had a trade to Oklahoma City, actually, just I think the year before, get nixed because he failed the physical. So instead, the Thunder went out and got Kendrick Perkins. I guarantee you the Thunder with Tyson Chandler instead of Kendrick Perkins would have beaten LeBron in the Heat in those 2012 finals, LeBron's first title. But, it is what it is. It worked out great for Dallas because instead Tyson got dealt to Charlotte, and then he played out the rest of that abysmal year there, and then he got traded to Dallas for the Eric Dampier trade chip. Facts. So, with that being the case, it's like, all right, you've got to be mindful here of what you're doing, and you have to make sure that you're building a competent team. And if you can't count on your number 2 guy, and he's missing close to half a season, 2 years in a row here, plus the rest of his track history, is it anything you can count on at all? Even count on in the simple nature of, oh, KP is available tonight and he's pretty healthy. We'll see, man. Well, you guys have been incredibly quiet in the chat here compared to usual. We got 70 people in the house. Not sure why. You know what? I'm noticing the only people who have commented are the moderators. Is there a setting on here set with that? Let's see. Even if there is, I don't know that I can make a change to it now. Live chat's enabled. No, you guys should be able to comment, so I just make myself sadder with pointing that out. Well, I don't know, man. If you guys don't have anything to chime in with or anything, this might just be the end of the live stream, and I might just have to go into the wrap up here because that was kind of the gist of what I was wanting to go with. So if there's not an active conversation to continue building off of with questions, then I guess this is going to be the wrap up here. So, quick bit of news here. My school semester is over. I did hold on to straight A's again by the skin of my teeth. Very, very close cut, but you know what? It's worth it. on pace to graduate summa cum laude in December. So that is like the highest honors distinctions that you can have in graduating. And I've already, as of the completion of this semester, completed my sports journalism certificate. So I am an officially recognized sports journalist as of now. So hey, there's something. So yeah, we'll be able to open that up and start doing some more great content and start seeing how much more I can bring to the table as I continue to evolve this channel. Again, I had in the original run for this concept of this video, I had a very specific idea. Holy crap, there are 223 people watching right now and nobody is in the comments. YouTube. I'm going to have to say that's YouTube's fault. That is bonkers. Guys, drop a like. But I'm bringing out some new content here. I am going to be changing up the format, not in terms of what we're talking about, but in my presentation, because I have a much more refined skill set that I can bring to the table here, and I want to add some style to our discussions here. So stay tuned, like the video, drop a comment below, subscribe to the Dallas Prospect, and until next time, guys, remember, every legend was once a prospect. Peace.